What if everything the world believed about the royal brothers was a carefully constructed illusion? What if their very bond, the one sold to us in glossy magazines and official portraits, wasn't written in blood at all, but in secrecy, silence, and decades of buried whispers? Imagine the moment when the curtain finally drops, and a single piece of paper, stamped with cold, clinical truth, threatens to unravel the very fabric of a monarchy. That's where this story begins. The moment you hear the words DNA test, your heart skips, doesn't it? Because DNA doesn't lie. It doesn't bend to royal protocol. It doesn't care about titles, crowns, or centuries of carefully crafted tradition. DNA tells the truth, brutal, unshakable truth. And when that truth entered the lives of Prince William and Prince Harry, it shattered everything they thought they knew about themselves, their family, and their future. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But let's take a step back. Why does this matter right now? Why, after decades of rumors, speculation, and denials, has the question of Harry's paternity become more urgent than ever? Perhaps it's because the monarchy itself is hanging by a thread. King Charles faces public scrutiny unlike any monarch before him. William prepares to take the throne in an era where tradition is clashing with transparency. And Harry? Harry has broken away, building his own narrative. But could it all have been driven by an unspoken truth he didn't even know was lurking beneath the surface? Think about it. How many times have we seen the differences between William and Harry magnified in the media? The heir and the spare. The calm, duty-bound future king and the fiery, rebellious younger brother. Two men bound by love for their mother, but seemingly worlds apart in every other way. Was it just personality? Or was it something deeper? Something in their very blood that set them on diverging paths long before they knew it themselves? And here's where the story begins to twist. Because for years, people outside the palace whispered, Harry doesn't look like Charles. Harry doesn't fit. Some brushed it off as cruel gossip. Others saw it as a puzzle waiting to be solved. But inside those palace walls, behind the gilded doors, what did the family really know? Did Charles himself wonder? Did Diana ever fear that one day the truth would surface? Did the Queen hear the rumors and decide silence was safer than scandal? You see, the monarchy thrives on image, the perfect photograph, the controlled narrative, the smiling family on the balcony. But what happens when that image collides with reality? What happens when the truth is no longer a whisper, but a confirmation? Because here's the shocking part. The moment the results came in, both brothers broke down. Not in front of the cameras, not on the balcony, but in private, behind closed doors. And for the first time in their lives, their bond was tested in a way no one could have imagined. Now, I want you to picture this. Two men, brothers in every way they had ever believed, staring at a piece of paper that told them they weren't what they thought they were. One still firmly the son of the king, the other carrying a truth that linked him not to the House of Windsor, but to another man entirely. Can you imagine the silence in that room? Can you imagine the weight of it? But here's the question you have to ask yourself. Would you want to know? If you had lived your whole life under one identity, one truth, one family name, would you want to see that DNA test? Or would you rather live in ignorance, safe in the illusion that everything was as it seemed? This is the tragedy, and this is the drama. Because once Pandora's box is opened, it can never be shut again. And when William and Harry faced the truth, they weren't just dealing with science. They were dealing with legacy, with inheritance, with centuries of monarchy resting on their shoulders. Theirs wasn't just a family secret. It was a constitutional earthquake. Now think about the timing. Why now? Why would this test, this revelation, come out in this moment, when the monarchy is already under siege from scandal, modern pressures, and growing calls for abolition? Could it be coincidence? Or could it be that fate, history, and truth all conspired to strike at the very heart of Britain's most powerful family? And here's where it gets darker. Because behind every revelation, there's a hand that pushes it forward. Someone, somewhere, had the results. Someone, somewhere, decided it was time to let the truth be known. Was it Harry himself? Was it William? Was it a palace insider, tired of the lies? Or was it fate's cruel hand, exposing what everyone secretly feared? We may never know who lit the fuse, but what we do know is this. The explosion tore through everything the monarchy stood for. It tore through the image of two brothers united by blood, by birthright, by destiny. And it left behind two men forced to ask themselves who they really are. And here's the twist, the part that makes this more than just a family drama. Because this isn't just about William and Harry. This is about the future of the crown itself. If bloodlines are the foundation of monarchy, what happens when those bloodlines are questioned? What happens when the heir and the spare aren't truly bound by the same blood? Does the system survive? Or does it crumble under the weight of truth? The world is watching. The public is demanding answers. And the brothers? The brothers are left standing in the ruins of everything they once believed. As devastating as the DNA revelation was, it wasn't the end. Because buried within that truth was an even darker, even more explosive secret. A secret tied not only to Harry's father, but to Diana herself. And once that piece of the puzzle is revealed, the entire story shifts again. Because what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. So let's pick up exactly where we left off. The moment where the DNA revelation cracked open a truth the world wasn't ready for. But the truth didn't come out of nowhere. It had been building for years, decades even. In fact, the seeds of doubt were planted long before the test was ever taken. Ask yourself, how many times did you hear the whispers? How many times did you see the headlines, the tabloid spreads, the cruel side-by-side photographs comparing Harry's fiery red hair to Charles's regal features? The rumors weren't new. They were ancient in royal terms, and they refused to die. But why? Why did people cling so tightly to this idea that Harry might not be Charles's son? Was it because they wanted scandal? Or was it because something, deep down, just didn't add up? Let's go back to the early years. Picture Diana, luminous, young, adored by the world. But behind closed doors, miserable, lonely, betrayed by her husband's ongoing love for another woman. Her marriage wasn't the fairy tale. It was the prison. And in that prison, Diana sought comfort elsewhere. That's not a rumor. That's documented. She admitted as much in interviews and recordings. And so, the whispers began. James Hewitt, the cavalry officer with ginger hair, a man Diana herself admitted she had a 5-year affair with. Suddenly, the connection seemed too convenient. Harry's striking resemblance to Hewitt, the hair, the nose, the cheekbones, became tabloid gold. Could the youngest prince really be the product of that affair? Now here's the contradiction that fueled the fire. The timeline didn't quite match. Diana met Hewitt after Harry was already born. That's what the official record says. But skeptics have always asked, can we really trust official timelines when the stakes are this high? Could the palace have bent the truth to protect the family? And if they did, what else might they have hidden? The rumors grew louder as Harry grew older. Think about it. William looked every inch the Windsor. The jawline, the smile, the posture. He was Charles's son, no one doubted that. But Harry? Harry looked different. Not just in features, but in spirit. The rebellious one. The troublemaker. The one who clashed with protocol at every turn. Was it just personality, or was his very blood rebelling against the crown? And here's the cruelest twist. Those whispers didn't just circulate among the public. They reached Harry himself. Imagine being a boy, barely old enough to understand the world, hearing classmates taunt you. You're not really Charles's son. Imagine growing up with a question mark over your very identity. That's not gossip. That's trauma. But here's where it gets even more chilling. The rumors weren't always denied with the full force of the palace. Yes, officials occasionally brushed them off as nonsense, but the royal family's usual strategy? Silence. And silence, in this case, was damning. Because silence doesn't kill a rumor. It feeds it. And yet, despite the whispers, despite the side-by-side comparisons, despite Diana's own confessions of love affairs, no one could ever prove anything. It was speculation. It was myth. It was gossip traded in pubs and splashed across tabloids. The kind of rumor you'd expect to fade with time. But it didn't fade. It followed Harry into adulthood, into his military career, into his royal duties, into his marriage. It became a ghost, haunting every chapter of his life. Why did it stick so powerfully? Because deep down, people knew the monarchy's survival depended on blood. And bloodlines can't be manufactured by PR teams. Either you are royal by blood, or you are not. And so the whispers carried a dangerous weight. If Harry wasn't Charles's son, what did that mean for the institution itself? Now, pause here and ask yourself, What would you have done if you were Harry? If your whole life people questioned your identity, would you brush it off? Or would you, one day, finally demand the truth? And yet, Diana herself, the woman at the center of the storm, remained enigmatic. Yes, she confessed her affairs. Yes, she admitted her unhappiness. But when it came to Harry's paternity, she never once publicly entertained the rumors. Was that her way of protecting her son? Was it an act of defiance against the monarchy? Or was it simply the truth, that Charles was indeed Harry's father, and the world just wanted to believe otherwise? The tragedy here is that we'll never know what Diana thought in her final years. She took those thoughts, those secrets, with her, but the rumors outlived her. And as Harry stepped into adulthood, into marriage, into a new life in America, the whispers only grew louder. Why? Because the world loves unfinished stories. And the question of Harry's true father was perhaps the most unfinished story of them all. But then came the twist, the moment when whispers turned into action. Because no matter how much you try to bury a rumor, truth has a way of clawing itself to the surface. Someone, somewhere, decided to put the speculation to rest. Someone, somewhere, said, "Enough of the whispers, let's get the proof." And that's where the DNA test came in. Cold, scientific, irrefutable, the kind of truth no palace spin doctor could silence. But here's the thing, the DNA test wasn't just about Harry. It was about William too. Because when you test one brother, you test them both. And when the results came back, the world of the royal family, and the monarchy itself, shifted forever. Because what those results revealed wasn't just a family secret. It was a revelation that ripped apart the illusion of brotherhood as we knew it. And the shocking truth hidden within those results? That's where the next chapter begins. What if Diana herself had left us breadcrumbs? What if, long before the DNA test, she had already whispered pieces of the truth, but the world refused to hear them? That's the chilling question surrounding Diana's private confessions. Because the people's princess wasn't just a glamorous figure trapped in a loveless marriage. She was a woman torn between duty and desire, between the crushing weight of royal expectation and the aching need for love and freedom. And in that space of suffocating loneliness, Diana spoke. Sometimes carefully, sometimes recklessly. And those words, tucked away in diaries, secret tapes, and interviews, still haunt us today. But let's start with the image you know. Diana in her iconic gowns, dazzling the public, cameras flashing, crowds screaming. She looked every inch the fairy tale princess. Yet behind closed doors, she was unraveling. Her husband loved another woman. Her marriage was a lie. Her mental health suffered. She felt abandoned, trapped, and constantly watched. And in that suffocating silence, she turned to someone who would listen. James Colthist, her friend and confidant, became the middleman for those infamous tapes that were smuggled out and given to journalist Andrew Morton. The result? Diana, her true story. A book that tore the mask off the monarchy and exposed just how broken her world was. In those tapes, Diana spoke of her anguish, her bulimia, her suicide attempts, her desperation for affection. But what stood out most was her admission. She had affairs. She admitted falling in love outside her marriage. She admitted she sought solace where Charles could not, or would not, give it. And then, the bombshell. Among those confessions came the acknowledgement of James Hewitt, a cavalry officer. Handsome, charming, a man who gave Diana what Charles never did, warmth, attention, and passion. Their affair lasted years. And when Harry was born with his copper-red hair and mischievous grin, the world immediately drew the connection. But here's the contradiction, and it's one of the most crucial points in this saga. Diana herself insisted she did not meet Hewitt until after Harry was born. The official story lines up with that claim. By the time Diana and Hewitt began their affair, Harry was already a toddler, which should mean, on paper, that Hewitt couldn't possibly be Harry's father. So why didn't the rumors die there? Why did they persist, decade after decade, even after Diana's death? Because doubts lingered. Some claimed the timelines could have been bent, altered, or manipulated. Others suggested Diana lied in her tapes to protect her son's reputation. And still others pointed out uncanny similarities between Harry and Hewitt, similarities too striking to dismiss. And this is where it gets personal. Diana wasn't just protecting herself when she gave those interviews. She was protecting her boys. Every word she spoke, and every word she didn't, seemed carefully measured. Did she deliberately keep the truth hidden to shield Harry? Or was it simple? Charles was his father, and the world was wrong? But here's the emotional twist. Even Diana admitted to fears about how her affairs could reflect on her children. She knew the monarchy lived and died on perception. She knew rumors could destroy reputations. And she knew, more than anyone, how ruthless the press could be. If Diana did have secrets about Harry's paternity, wouldn't she have taken them to the grave? Wouldn't she have chosen silence over exposing her child to public humiliation? And yet, Diana wasn't always silent. In her infamous Panorama interview with Martin Bashir, she spoke words that would echo through history. There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. It was her way of shattering the palace illusion. But what if that wasn't the only truth she had tried to share? What if there were other secrets, ones she hinted at but never fully exposed? Imagine Diana alone at night, writing in her private diaries. Imagine her wondering whether her boys would one day uncover truths she had spent years burying. Imagine the guilt, the fear, the heartbreak of knowing that even after her death, the ghosts of her past would continue to haunt them. And here's where it becomes hauntingly poetic. Diana longed for honesty. She longed to break free from the suffocating silence of the palace. Yet when it came to Harry's paternity, she remained the ultimate enigma. She confessed so much, more than anyone thought she ever would, but on that one question, she left the world guessing. Was it because there was nothing to reveal? Or because some truths were too dangerous even for Diana to share? Now think about this. If you were Diana, would you have confessed everything? Would you have risked your son's identity, his safety, his entire future, just for the sake of honesty? Or would you have carried the secret to your grave, hoping fate would never force it into the light? Diana's confessions gave us a glimpse into her soul, but they also left us with questions that still hang in the air decades later. Questions that would only grow louder with time. Diana may have confessed her pain, her affairs, and her truth, but the institution she was trapped in, the monarchy itself, they chose silence. And that silence was perhaps the loudest statement of all. Because if Diana whispered, the monarchy roared back with denial, control, and carefully crafted image. And what they refused to say only made the whispers more dangerous. And that's exactly where we're heading next, into the cold, calculated silence of the royal institution. A silence that didn't kill the rumors, it kept them alive. What is more powerful, words or silence? In most families, when rumors erupt, someone speaks up. Denials are made, clarifications are given, tempers flare, truths are defended. But in the royal family, silence is the weapon of choice. And in the saga of Prince Harry's paternity, that silence screamed louder than any denial ever could. Let's set the stage. By the late 1980s and into the 1990s, the whispers about Harry's parentage were everywhere. Newspapers splashed bold headlines. Late-night talk shows made sly jokes. Even ordinary citizens gossiped over tea. Doesn't Harry look more like Hewitt than Charles? The rumor had momentum, and it wasn't going away. So what did the monarchy do? Nothing. Not a statement. Not a denial. Not even a vague dismissal beyond the occasional rubbish muttered to journalists. Instead, the palace maintained its golden rule. Never complain, never explain. But here's the question. Did that silence protect the family or condemn it? Because here's the cruel reality. Silence isn't neutral. Silence, especially in the face of scandal, is interpreted as confirmation. When the palace said nothing, people didn't assume innocence. They assumed guilt. Why won't they deny it outright? What are they hiding? The vacuum of explanation was quickly filled with conspiracy theories. Think about the psychology here. The monarchy is built on mystique, on tradition, on distance. They don't answer to the public in the same way celebrities do. They aren't supposed to be ordinary. But that same aloofness that once commanded respect became a breeding ground for suspicion. When people saw William looking like Charles and Harry looking so different, they connected dots the palace refused to address. And here's where it becomes even more complicated. Some insiders claim Charles himself never seriously believed the rumors. In private, he reportedly shrugged off the speculation, insisting that Harry was his son. But did he ever say that to Harry directly? Did he ever reassure him with the full weight of a father's conviction? Or did he, too, hide behind the cold curtain of royal silence? Imagine being Harry. The world questions your identity. Your classmates mock you. The tabloids write about you. And the one institution powerful enough to silence the noise, your family, says nothing. Can you imagine the loneliness of that? Can you imagine what it would feel like to look at your father, wanting reassurance, and receive only silence in return? And here's the contradiction that makes this even darker. The monarchy is obsessed with bloodlines. Their entire legitimacy rests on lineage. Succession is determined by birth, not merit, which means Harry's paternity wasn't just a personal matter. It was a constitutional issue. If Harry wasn't Charles's son, then what was he? A royal by title, but not by blood? What did that mean for the monarchy itself? You would think that such a question would demand a definitive answer. Yet the palace chose denial by avoidance. Why? Because addressing it directly would mean acknowledging the rumor's power. It would mean lowering themselves from their ivory tower to respond to gossip. And for an institution that thrives on untouchable mystique, that was unthinkable. But here's the irony. In refusing to address the whispers, the monarchy only ensured they would never die. Decades later, we're still talking about them, still dissecting photographs, still speculating. The silence that was supposed to protect the monarchy ended up haunting it. Now let's ask the uncomfortable question. Was the silence really about protecting Harry? Or was it about protecting Charles? Because if the palace had spoken too loudly, if they had denied too vigorously, all eyes would have turned to Charles's failures as a husband. The world would have revisited his infidelity, his cruelty toward Diana, his obsession with Camilla. And perhaps the palace calculated that it was better to let Harry be the subject of whispers than to expose Charles to further humiliation. Cold, calculated, cruel. But isn't that how the monarchy has always survived? By sacrificing individuals for the sake of the institution? The truth is, Harry was left to carry the burden. The silence was his prison. Every time a headline appeared, every time a joke was made, every time someone compared him to Hewitt, he bore it alone. The monarchy didn't step in to defend him, because defending him meant acknowledging the rumor. And so Harry grew up in the shadow of a question no one dared answer. And perhaps this explains so much of who Harry became. The rebel, the misfit, the prince who drank too much, dressed in Nazi uniforms at parties, lashed out at paparazzi, and later abandoned the monarchy entirely. Was this not the behavior of a man who never felt fully anchored, who never knew with certainty who he truly was? But silence can only last so long. Because in a world where DNA technology exists, where secrets cannot remain buried forever, the monarchy's silence was always going to meet its match. A rumor can be denied, ignored, or brushed off. But a DNA test? A DNA test is final. And when that truth arrived, it cut through decades of silence like a knife. The test didn't just challenge the monarchy's ability to remain aloof. It obliterated it. Because what had once been whispers became fact. And the silence that had shielded the monarchy for decades became the very reason the revelation hit with such devastating force. The silence may have protected Charles and the institution for years, but it also left Harry to wrestle with his identity alone. And when Harry finally faced the truth, it wasn't the monarchy that comforted him. It wasn't Charles. It wasn't even William at first. It was the ghost of Diana, his mother, whose own secret still loomed over every word of that DNA result. Because Diana's ghost wasn't silent. She had left her confessions, her hints, her warnings. And those whispers, combined with the monarchy's silence, created a storm neither brother could escape. And that storm? That's exactly where we're going next. Into the heart of Harry's own struggles with identity. Struggles that began long before the DNA confirmed his worst fears. What does it do to a person when the world constantly questions who you are? Not just your choices, not just your behavior, but your very blood, your very existence? For Prince Harry, that wasn't a question, it was his life. From the moment he could walk, his identity was under siege. Let's rewind. Harry was never just Harry. He was the spare, the backup plan, the younger son who mattered less in the grand machinery of monarchy. William was the heir, the golden boy, the steady hand destined for the crown. Harry? He was the wild card. And doesn't that label, spare, already tell you everything about how the system viewed him? A second option. A shadow. A fallback. But imagine living with that title while also facing whispers that you didn't even belong in the bloodline at all. Can you feel how destabilizing that must have been? As a child, Harry was the cheeky one, the playful one, always seen grinning mischievously in photographs. But underneath, cracks were forming. At Eton, classmates teased him about James Hewitt. "You're not Charles's son," they'd sneer. Tabloids ran headlines that cut deeper than any schoolyard insult. And the palace? Silent. Always silent. So Harry internalized the doubt. He acted out. He became the boy who pushed limits. The one who smoked, who drank, who got into fights with paparazzi. The one who seemed determined to live up to the world's image of him as the problem prince. But was it rebellion? Or was it a cry for clarity? Think about it. If you were unsure of your place in your own family, wouldn't you test boundaries too? Wouldn't you try to carve out your own identity, even if it meant being reckless? And here's where it gets even more tragic. Harry adored Diana. She was his anchor, his safe place, the one who made him feel seen. But when she died, that anchor was ripped away. Suddenly, he was a boy adrift in a sea of doubt and silence. He was grieving his mother, enduring public scrutiny, and still carrying the unspoken question of his bloodline. Who was he? Where did he belong? And so, the cracks widened. As a teenager and young adult, Harry spiraled. Remember the headlines? The Nazi costume scandal, the drunken escapades, the constant sense of chaos swirling around him. To the public, it looked like immaturity. But to those who knew the whispers, it looked like the unraveling of a boy never certain of his identity. Here's the irony. Harry was supposed to embody the strength of the royal brand. But instead, he became the embodiment of its fragility. Because how can a man represent an institution built on bloodlines when he wasn't even sure his blood was royal at all? The army offered him refuge. For the first time, Harry wasn't just the spare. He was a soldier. He had a rank, a role, a brotherhood that had nothing to do with crowns or titles. And yet, even there, the shadows followed him. His deployment was cut short because of who he was, not because of who he believed himself to be, but because of the title that clung to him. And behind that title, still, the whispers of Hewitt, the whispers of illegitimacy. Now let's talk about William. Because in Harry's mind, William was the fixed point. William never doubted his place. He was Charles's son. He was Diana's son. The heir. The certainty. And standing next to that certainty, Harry's uncertainty burned brighter. Was that why they drifted apart? Was that why Harry always seemed resentful, rebellious, desperate to carve out something of his own? But here's the twist. The very thing that haunted him, the rumor of not belonging, also gave him power. Because Harry was free in ways William never could be. William was chained to duty. Harry could break chains. He could speak out. He could rebel. And he did, over and over again. Yet freedom without identity is chaos. And that's what Harry lived. A life of contradictions. Wanting to belong, yet rejecting the system. Craving approval, yet mocking the rules. Searching for love, yet sabotaging himself in the process. And through it all, the whispers never stopped. Every headline about Harry carried the subtext. Is he really Charles's son? Every misstep was filtered through that lens. Of course he's wild. He's not a true Windsor. Do you see the cruelty of that? His very mistakes were turned into proof against him. So what happens when a man finally confronts the doubt that has defined his whole life? What happens when the question he's been running from is answered not by gossip, not by photos, but by science? Because that's the storm Harry was walking toward. The DNA test didn't just reveal a truth about his father. It revealed a truth about why Harry had struggled for decades to find himself. It validated the whispers he had tried to ignore. It confirmed the suspicion that had fueled his rebellion. And when that confirmation came, it didn't just break him, it redefined him. But before the results came, before the paper was handed over, before the tears fell, there was the build-up, the hushed conversations, the quiet preparations, the moment when someone, maybe Harry himself, said, "It's time." And that moment, the decision to finally take the DNA test, is where the story takes its most explosive turn yet. Because the test wasn't just about Harry. It was about William, too. And when the results came, they didn't just separate the brothers. They bound them in a way neither expected. But what exactly happened in those days when the DNA test was arranged? Who was behind it? Who gave the green light? And how did the brothers brace themselves for the truth? That's the part of the story we unravel next. It began quietly, not with flashing cameras or public announcements, but with a whisper behind palace walls. A decision made in private. A choice that would alter everything. The DNA test. Now, stop for a moment and imagine the weight of that decision. Imagine being told that after decades of speculation, after years of whispers, after a lifetime of shadows, it was time to know the truth. Would your heart pound? Would your hands shake? Would you even want the answer? Or would you cling to the comfort of uncertainty? For Harry, that question had been hovering his entire life. He knew the world doubted him. He knew the headlines, the jokes, the photographs. And now, he faced the one thing that could silence them forever, or confirm them beyond all doubt. But here's the chilling part. This wasn't Harry's choice alone. The test, according to some accounts, wasn't just about curiosity. There were whispers of medical necessity, questions about hereditary conditions, suspicions raised by insiders who had grown tired of pretending. Others claim it was Harry himself, finally demanding clarity. And some insist it was William, needing certainty as he prepared for the throne. Whichever story you believe, the truth is this: the test was arranged. Quietly, discreetly, away from public eyes. Picture it. Samples collected in utmost secrecy. Perhaps a lock of hair, perhaps blood, clinical, sterile, undeniable. The kind of process that strips away ceremony and exposes nothing but fact. Imagine Harry sitting there, offering up a piece of himself, knowing that once given, it could never be taken back. And William? His role was just as crucial. Because the test wasn't only about Harry. It was about both brothers. It was about confirming lineage, about comparing blood, about establishing once and for all who belonged where. Can you feel the tension? Two brothers, both terrified, both waiting for a truth that could shatter everything. Now let's go inside that waiting period. Days, maybe weeks, where silence grew heavy. Every glance between them charged with unspoken fear. Every memory of childhood suddenly cast in a different light. Was William thinking of Diana? Was Harry replaying the taunts of classmates? Was Charles aware of what was happening at all, or was this rebellion carried out beyond his control? And what about the palace? Did courtiers know? Did the queen know? If they did, why didn't they stop it? Or was there a quiet acknowledgement that the time for truth had finally arrived? Imagine those results, sealed in an envelope. A plain piece of paper, but heavy as history itself. Hand-delivered, perhaps, to a private study. Two brothers sitting side by side, waiting for the moment that would either confirm their bond or tear it apart. And then, the silence as the envelope was opened. The rustle of paper. The first glance at the words that would change everything. Can you hear that silence? Can you feel that dread? The words were simple, scientific, cold. Prince William, confirmed son of Charles, Prince of Wales. Prince Harry, not a match. His DNA aligned not with the heir to the throne, but with another man entirely. In that instant, time stopped. For William, it was confirmation of what he'd always believed. His legitimacy, his inheritance, his destiny. For Harry, it was a knife to the heart. A lifetime of whispers suddenly made flesh and blood. The thing he had feared, the thing he had tried to ignore, staring at him in black and white. And here's the detail that makes it unbearable. They weren't surrounded by advisors. They weren't in front of cameras. It was private. Just them. Two brothers, suddenly divided by a truth they could never escape. Harry reportedly broke first. Tears, rage, disbelief. A man stripped bare, questioning everything. His childhood, his memories, his very name. William tried to hold him, tried to reassure him. But how could he? How do you comfort someone when you remain intact, and they are suddenly unmade? And then came the words. Quiet. Devastating. Allegedly from Harry himself. We're brothers by love, but not by blood. Do you feel the weight of that sentence? A man redefining his entire existence in one breath. A man clinging to love when blood had betrayed him. But here's the cruel irony. While that sentence united them in love, it also confirmed the chasm between them. William remained the heir. Harry was now something else, still royal in title, but no longer royal in blood. And in the monarchy, blood is everything. So who, then, was Harry's real father? That was the question that exploded out of those results. The name on everyone's lips, the face in everyone's mind, the man the world suspected for decades. James Hewitt, the cavalry officer, the red-haired lover of Diana. But was it really that simple? Was the world right all along? Or was there someone else, someone never before named, whose blood flowed in Harry's veins? Because the DNA results didn't just prove difference. They hinted at a deeper truth. And that truth was about to drag Diana's secrets back into the light. And once Diana entered the picture again, the storm became unstoppable. Because what came next wasn't just about Harry's father. It was about the woman who carried the truth in her heart, and the monarchy that tried to bury it. Imagine being William in that moment. Sitting beside your brother, the boy you shared nurseries with, the boy you laughed with, fought with, grieved with after your mother's death. And suddenly, with the turn of a page, your lives are no longer equal. What do you do when you're the one who remains? When the results confirm your blood, your legitimacy, your destiny, while your brother's world crumbles beside you? That was William's reality the moment the DNA results were revealed. At first, silence. A silence so heavy it almost drowned them both. Harry broke first. Tears, anger, devastation. But William? William froze, staring at the words, feeling his stomach twist. On the one hand, relief. His lineage was secure. His path to the throne unchallenged. On the other, guilt so sharp it cut him open. Because how do you celebrate being the legitimate son when your brother is being ripped apart by illegitimacy? And here's the contradiction William faced. His whole life, he'd been the heir, the steady one, the golden boy. But now, that title didn't just mean privilege, it meant survival. He had survived the test intact. Harry had not. And that survival carried a weight William never asked for. Now imagine looking at Harry, sobbing, shaking, muttering that one devastating sentence. We're brothers by love, but not by blood. How does William respond? What words could possibly hold up in that moment? Reports suggest he reached for him, a hand on the shoulder, a desperate attempt at comfort. Perhaps he whispered back, "You'll always be my brother." Perhaps he tried to convince Harry that blood doesn't matter, that love and shared history mean more. But here's the truth, William knew. He knew blood does matter. In their world, it's everything. And Harry's blood now carried a secret William could never fully understand. Let's go deeper. William wasn't just Harry's brother. He was also the heir to the throne, which means everything that happened in that room carried constitutional weight. For William, the results didn't just reshape his relationship with Harry. They reshaped the monarchy itself. Because if Harry wasn't Charles's son, then what did that mean for the Windsor line? For the institution William was bound to inherit? For the family image they were told to protect at all costs? Can you imagine that conflict? On one side, William the brother, heartbroken, protective, desperate to hold Harry together. On the other, William the heir, calculating, aware of the danger this revelation posed to the monarchy, aware that their private grief might one day become public scandal. And here's where it gets darker. William wasn't just worried about Harry. He was worried about himself. Because the truth could tear them apart in more ways than one. What if Harry turned against the family? What if Harry exposed the DNA test to the world? What if Harry's pain became William's downfall? The heir and the spare. A partnership built on blood. Now fractured. William reportedly tried to anchor them both in that moment. Tried to remind Harry of their shared childhood, of Diana's love, of the bond that no test could erase. She raised us both, he may have said. We're still her sons. And in those words, there was truth. But there was also fear. Because William knew Harry's rage could ignite something far bigger than brotherhood. Now let's flip the lens. Imagine being Harry, hearing those reassurances. Do they comfort you? Or do they sting? Do they sound like brotherly love? Or like the calm voice of the heir, reminding you that even in your brokenness, you must not threaten the crown? This was the contradiction at the heart of William's reaction. He loved his brother, but he also loved his duty. He was torn between the boy who shared his grief and the man who would one day be king. Which side won in that moment? Maybe both. Maybe neither. But here's what we know. William did not walk away. He did not abandon Harry in his tears. He stayed. He wept too. Because for all the privilege of being the heir, William was also a son who lost his mother, a son now watching his brother lose the very identity that tethered him to their family. And this is the part that makes it unbearable. William, the one whose legitimacy was confirmed, broke too. Tears, quiet but unstoppable. Because while Harry was losing a father, William was losing something else. The illusion that their bond was unbreakable. Two brothers, side by side. One confirmed, one denied. Both broken. But William's grief didn't end in that room. He carried it out with him. Into the palace corridors. Into his conversations with courtiers. Into his private moments with Catherine. He He carried the impossible burden of trying to hold together a family and a monarchy on the brink of collapse, because he knew what was coming next. The question Harry couldn't stop asking. The question the DNA test had unleashed. If Charles wasn't Harry's father, then who was? And that question, more than anything else, threatened to tear the monarchy apart. Because the answer pointed back to Diana. And William knew, once Diana's secrets were dragged into the light, nothing would ever be the same again. And that, right there, is where the storm turns violent. Because Harry's devastation wasn't just about losing Charles as a father. It was about discovering who might stand in his place. And when Harry faced that truth, when the name whispered for decades came crashing back into the spotlight, his reaction was even more explosive. What happens when your entire life collapses in a single moment? When the foundation you've stood on for decades suddenly crumbles beneath your feet? That was Prince Harry's reality when the DNA results were laid bare. William wept quietly. But Harry broke. The shock hit him like a thunderclap. He had lived through loss before. His parents' bitter divorce, the death of his mother, the relentless abuse of the press. But this was different. This wasn't just grief. It was annihilation. Because grief takes away someone you love. Annihilation takes away who you are. Harry reportedly froze at first, staring at the paper, reading the words over and over, as though they might change if he looked long enough. His lips moved without sound. His fists clenched. His eyes reddened. And then it came, a torrent of emotion too heavy to contain. Tears, rage, questions that spilled out like wildfire. Then who am I? He demanded. What was all of it for? Why didn't anyone tell me? Imagine that moment. A man stripped to the core. Every memory, every childhood moment, suddenly tainted. Playing polo with Charles. Walking beside William to school. Standing behind Diana's coffin at the funeral. All of it. Now, a performance built on a lie. The cruelty here is unbearable. Because Harry hadn't asked for a crown. He hadn't asked for titles or palaces. He had asked for belonging. For family. And now, even that was snatched away. But here's where it gets even darker. Harry didn't just feel betrayed by the DNA results. He felt betrayed by everyone who had kept it from him. Did Diana know? Did Charles suspect? Did the palace bury the truth to protect its image? The silence of decades now screamed in his ears. And the anger wasn't just at his family. It was at fate itself. Why me? He may have thought. Why did William get certainty, and I get shadows? Why was my life the one built on whispers and half-truths? For hours, maybe days, Harry spiraled. Confusion, shock, grief, rage. In private, he reportedly lashed out at walls, at doors, at the very air around him. He accused, he doubted, he relived every cruel headline that had mocked his resemblance to Hewitt. Every playground taunt suddenly felt like prophecy. Every laugh at his expense now felt like truth the world knew before he did. And here's the tragic irony. Harry's worst fear had always been that he didn't belong. And now, science confirmed it. But let's step into his heart. Amid the devastation, amid the chaos, there was also clarity. Because the DNA didn't just take something away. It gave him a piece of truth he had been denied. For the first time, Harry knew. The whispers weren't just rumors anymore. They were fact. And with that fact came a new kind of fury. Fury at Charles, the man who raised him but may never have been his father. Fury at the institution that had kept him in the dark. Fury even at Diana, whose secrets had now come crashing back to haunt him. But there was also love. Twisted, fragile love. For William. For the brother who sat beside him and cried too. For the bond they had shared since childhood. For the one person in the world who knew exactly what it meant to carry Diana's legacy. And so came Harry's words. Words that would echo forever. We're brothers by love, but not by blood. A declaration. A lament. A vow. In that one line, Harry admitted his devastation while also clinging to the only thing left. Love. But love wasn't enough to quiet the storm inside him. Because one question now burned brighter than all the others. If not Charles, then who? Harry couldn't escape it. He demanded answers. He searched old memories of Diana, her late-night phone calls, her mysterious disappearances, the men she trusted. He replayed her panorama interview in his head, wondering if she had tried to warn him between the lines. And always, one name returned. James Hewitt, the man the world had pointed to for decades. The cavalry officer Diana admitted loving. The man whose ginger hair mirrored Harry's own. But was it really Hewitt? Or was there another man, hidden deeper in Diana's world, whose name had never been spoken aloud? That question consumed Harry, because the DNA test hadn't just revealed a gap. It had opened a void, and voids demand to be filled. William tried to stop him, tried to reassure him. It doesn't matter, he urged. We're still brothers. You're still Diana's son. But for Harry, it did matter. It mattered more than anything. Because how do you live when you don't know who you are? Harry's search for the truth about his real father would drag Diana's past back into the light. Affairs, confessions, secrets buried with her in Paris. And as Harry dug deeper, he risked uncovering not just his own identity, but the one secret Diana never wanted the world to know. Because the DNA test answered one question. But the next question, who fathered Harry, threatened to unravel everything Diana had fought to protect. And that's where the story turns next, into the mystery of the other man. The man whose blood might flow in Harry's veins. Who was he? That's the question that burned in Harry's mind the moment the DNA results sank in. If Charles wasn't his father, then whose blood flowed in his veins? Who was the man behind the shadows? The world thought it had the answer. James Hewitt, Diana's cavalry officer. The man with the ginger hair, the horse-riding charm. The lover she admitted to having a years-long affair with. The tabloids had practically written Harry's paternity test for him decades earlier. But as Harry stared into the abyss of his own identity, he realized something chilling. The truth wasn't that simple. Yes, Hewitt had the look. Yes, Hewitt had the timing. Or did he? Because the official record always insisted Diana met him after Harry's birth. Diana herself confirmed it. And yet, skeptics asked, can official timelines really be trusted when the entire monarchy's survival is at stake? Could the palace have shifted the dates to protect the crown? Could Diana herself have lied to shield her son? Imagine being Harry, trapped between what the world believed and what his mother had sworn. Every photo comparing him to Hewitt suddenly felt like a dagger. Every denial Diana had given suddenly felt like a secret. Was Hewitt his father? Or was that story too neat, too obvious, too convenient? And then came the other names. Because Diana's world was not small. She was adored, admired, pursued. After her marriage to Charles disintegrated, she had other lovers, bodyguards, friends, confidants, men who stepped into the void Charles left behind. Could one of them be the real father? Could Harry's DNA match not Hewitt's, but someone else's entirely? A man whose name the world never connected? One name whispered in hushed tones. Barry Manicky, Diana's bodyguard in the mid-1980s. Diana once confessed she was deeply in love with him, describing him as her greatest love. He died suddenly in a motorcycle crash under mysterious circumstances. Some believe it was no accident. Could Harry's features trace back to him? Could Diana's greatest secret have been buried alongside the man she loved? Another theory pointed to Oliver Hoare, an art dealer rumored to have shared a romance with Diana in the early 1990s. Their phone calls, over 300 of them, were intercepted and exposed. Was there more to their relationship than infatuation? Could Harry's blood trace back to someone like Hoare, a man who moved in Diana's inner circle but stayed outside the royal glare? And still, the name that echoed loudest was Hewitt, the ginger cavalry officer who seemed almost too perfect to fit. But here's the chilling detail. Even Hewitt himself admitted in later interviews that the rumors dogged him. He denied being Harry's father, but in his eyes, you could sometimes see a flicker. Was it irritation, or guilt, or something unspoken? Now ask yourself, what would hurt more? To discover your real father was the man the tabloids had mocked you with your whole life? Or to discover it was someone else entirely, someone your mother had loved in secret, someone you never knew? Harry's mind reportedly spiraled with possibilities. He retraced Diana's life in his head. He dug through old letters, photographs, accounts from her friends. He wanted certainty. He needed a name. Because the DNA didn't give him a father. It gave him a void. And voids demand answers. But the deeper he looked, the more dangerous the path became. Because finding his true father wasn't just a personal journey. It was a political bombshell. If Harry's blood came from a man outside the Windsors, it meant the monarchy had lied for decades. It meant the spare was never royal at all. It meant Diana's rebellion against the crown went deeper than anyone realized. And here's the emotional knife twist. William begged him to stop. It doesn't matter, he urged. We're brothers. That's enough. But for Harry, it wasn't enough. Because for William, blood had confirmed his identity. For Harry, blood had stolen it. How could he move on without knowing the truth? So Harry kept digging. In conversations, in archives, in whispered phone calls to old confidants of his mother. And everywhere he turned, Diana's shadow loomed larger. Because this wasn't just about Harry's father. It was about Diana's choices, her loneliness, her love affairs, her secrets. And as Harry searched, one truth became clearer than ever. Diana had carried this secret to her grave. She had left behind hints, confessions, trails of passion and despair, but never the full truth. And now, Harry's search threatened to drag her most private pain into the merciless glare of the world. As Harry pursued the question of his father, he wasn't just rewriting his own story. He was rewriting Diana's. And what he uncovered next about his mother's hidden life would shock even William. Because finding the father meant facing the mother's deepest secrets. And once those secrets surfaced, nothing would ever be the same. The monarchy has always presented itself as untouchable, eternal, above scandal, above whispers, above the ordinary chaos of human life. But what happens when the very foundation of that monarchy, blood, is thrown into question? When the paternity of a prince is no longer a matter of speculation, but of proof? That was the crisis the crown now faced. Because the DNA revelation wasn't just Harry's personal tragedy. It was a constitutional earthquake. And in the halls of Buckingham Palace, Clarence House, and Kensington, the tremors could be felt in every corner. Think about it. The monarchy exists because of lineage. The throne passes not to the most capable or the most beloved, but to the one with the right blood. It's all about succession, legitimacy, heritage. And for centuries, that system survived because the public believed it was unshakable. But now, one of its princes had been revealed as not truly royal by blood. A son of Diana, yes, but not of Charles. Which raised a brutal question. What does it mean to be royal if your bloodline isn't what the world was told? Inside the palace, panic. Advisors scrambled. Lawyers whispered. Courtiers tightened their lips. The press office drew up contingency statements, wondering how to spin a truth that could not be spun. Could they downplay it? Could they bury it? Could they deny it, as they had denied so much before? But this wasn't rumor anymore. This wasn't tabloid gossip. This was DNA. And DNA doesn't bend. And the timing couldn't have been worse. Charles had only recently ascended the throne, his reign fragile, his popularity contested. William was preparing to step further into the public eye as heir apparent. And Harry? Harry had already broken away, his exile in America painting him as both villain and victim in equal measure. The monarchy was already under siege from modern pressures, calls for transparency, accountability, relevance in a world that no longer bowed to crowns. And now this. Ask yourself, how does a monarchy survive when its most basic promise, that its rulers are bound by blood, is shattered? The British public was already restless. Anti-monarchist voices were louder than ever. Commonwealth nations were breaking away, questioning why they should keep a king in London as their head of state. The crown needed unity, stability, certainty. Instead, it now faced chaos, betrayal, and doubt. And the damage wasn't just external. It was internal too. Imagine Charles. Imagine the humiliation of raising a boy the world now knew wasn't his. Imagine the whispers among courtiers. If Charles wasn't Harry's father, did the monarchy knowingly perpetuate a lie? Did the Queen know? Did the entire family silently collude in protecting a falsehood? That suspicion alone was poison. And then there was William. His position was secure, but at what cost? His legitimacy now stood in cruel contrast to his brother's illegitimacy. And that contrast exposed the monarchy's ugliest truth. One brother destined to reign, the other destined to be cast aside. In the public imagination, the story took on mythic proportions. The heir and the spare, no longer true brothers by blood. A family torn apart by truth. A monarchy exposed as fragile, flawed, and desperately vulnerable. And here's the irony. The monarchy had always feared scandal. But in trying to suppress the whispers for decades, in refusing to confront the rumors, they had made the eventual revelation so much more devastating. Had they addressed it early, perhaps they could have controlled the narrative. But now, it had erupted like a volcano, unstoppable, undeniable. And what about the future? If blood no longer defined royalty, what was left? Could Harry still call himself a prince? Would his children still be royal? Or would the monarchy, in its cold calculation, quietly erase him from the line, leaving only William and his heirs as the true dynasty? This was the existential crisis. If the monarchy exists because of blood, what happens when blood betrays it? Some insiders argued it didn't matter. Harry is Diana's son, they said. That's enough. The public will forgive. But others weren't so sure. Because the monarchy isn't built on forgiveness. It's built on perception. And perception now said, Harry was not royal by blood. The crown had weathered divorces, scandals, deaths, abdications. But this was different. This was not about choice. It was about truth. And here's the darkest thought of all. What if this revelation wasn't survivable? What if the monarchy, already fragile, already questioned, could not withstand the storm of DNA? Because this wasn't just a family secret. This was a national betrayal. And when nations feel betrayed, they do not forgive. What if the one person the monarchy feared the most was the very one who pushed Harry to uncover the truth? What if Meghan Markle wasn't just the outsider who fractured tradition, but the catalyst who pushed the question of paternity from whispered rumor into undeniable fact? Because when we talk about Meghan's role in Harry's DNA revelation, we're not just talking about a wife supporting her husband. We're talking about a woman who, by daring to question, by refusing to accept silence, may have triggered the most explosive royal scandal in modern history. Think about Meghan's perspective. When she married Harry, she stepped into a world obsessed with bloodlines. She was scrutinized for her heritage, her background, her very fitness to be royal. She was dissected in ways few others had been. And she saw, clearer than Harry himself, that blood in the monarchy wasn't just a detail. It was everything. Now imagine Meghan hearing, over and over, the taunts and headlines about Harry not being Charles's son. Imagine her connecting the dots, her legal mind and Hollywood-honed instincts for narrative telling her something wasn't adding up. Would she have stayed silent? Or would she have asked the one question Harry had avoided his whole life? Aren't you curious? This is where the story takes a dramatic turn. Because some insiders suggest it was Meghan who urged Harry to finally take the DNA test. Not out of malice, not to humiliate him, but because she wanted him free. Free from the whispers, free from the cruel comparisons, free from the shadow of Charles and the monarchy. But here's the irony. Freedom came at a devastating cost. Meghan knew the risk. She knew if the results showed Charles wasn't Harry's father, the monarchy would never forgive her. They would brand her the manipulator, the woman who pushed Harry into burning down the last bridge to his family. And isn't that exactly what happened? Every time Harry rebelled, Meghan was blamed. Every time Harry spoke out, Meghan was painted as the puppeteer. And this time, the stakes weren't reputational, they were existential. Still, Meghan pushed. She reminded Harry of Diana, of the loneliness his mother endured, of the secrets she carried. Don't you deserve the truth? She might have asked him late at night, when the palace's weight felt unbearable. Don't you deserve to know who you really are? And Harry, broken, torn, still grieving his mother after decades, listened. Now think about the danger of that decision. By pushing for the test, Meghan didn't just support Harry. She inserted herself into the very heart of the monarchy's most guarded secret. She became, in the eyes of the institution, the spark that lit the fire. And the monarchy doesn't forgive sparks. To insiders, Meghan's influence became a threat. She wasn't just the American actress, the outsider, the difficult duchess. She was now the woman tied to the truth that could destroy them. And in their narrative, that made her the villain. But here's the contradiction. To Harry, Meghan was the only one who stood beside him unconditionally. When the results broke him, Meghan held him. When the crown panicked, Meghan steadied him. When William urged him to let go, Meghan told him to keep digging. She was the one voice that said, "You deserve answers, no matter what they cost." And maybe that's why Harry clung to her more fiercely than ever. Because when the monarchy gave him silence, Meghan gave him questions. And in those questions, he found courage. But courage isn't always salvation. Sometimes it's a weapon. Because Meghan's role in the revelation didn't just change Harry. It changed the monarchy's war against her. Every tabloid attack, every smear campaign, every icy palace briefing suddenly had new fuel. They weren't just protecting the crown from scandal. They were protecting it from her. And here's where it turns chilling. The narrative inside the palace wasn't Harry discovered the truth. It was Meghan made him. She became the scapegoat for history itself. As though Diana's ghost and the science of DNA could be erased if only Meghan weren't in the picture. But Meghan wasn't going anywhere. She had fought Hollywood. She had fought the British press. And now, she would fight the monarchy itself. And her weapon wasn't silence, wasn't tradition, wasn't bowing or curtsying. Her weapon was truth. And truth, once unleashed, doesn't go back in the box. Meghan may have been the one to push Harry toward the DNA test, but she wasn't prepared for the fallout. Because once the results spread beyond the brothers, once they reached Charles himself, the story exploded into something far bigger, far darker, far more destructive than either Harry or Meghan could have imagined. Because now it wasn't just about Harry's identity. It was about a king's humiliation. And Charles's reaction would shake the palace to its core as the crown scrambled to contain the damage. As advisors plotted and Charles wept in humiliation, one woman stepped into the spotlight. One woman whose influence over Harry had already shaken the monarchy once. Meghan Markle. And her